I love when I come across artists that have a different sound. And I love that, when there's artists that you can't quite pigeonhole, because so many like big labels try and force artists into these little boxes. And I don't think your guys' sound can be forced into a box. But that, to me, that's what makes it more interesting. But along those lines, I'm curious, how do you describe it to people who have yet to hear you?
Um, that's a very nice observation. Thank you for that. We do understand that we don't fit neatly into a box, so to speak, and I think that's a result of all the artists that we grew up with, that we learned from. They're all kind of mixed up together. We do describe what we're doing as Americana, for lack of a better genre. It seems to be uh, a rather nice, wide,
Catch-all.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
catch-all genre. Uh, so that's I would we describe ourselves as Americana being a mashup of country and rock and folk all pushed together. It could
Yeah.
be Johnny Cash or Patsy Cline one moment, and then it could be the Smiths, and then it could be the Beatles. I mean, and throw in a nice composed Jimi Hendrix solo. I mean, it's
Right.
all there. It all sort of blends in together. But Americana, for lack of a better option.
Right, right. And on this particular album, what really stood out to me, and one of my favorite examples of this, is the song "Dark Sun Rising," which to me is as this great mesh goes between country and rock, between verse and chorus. And well, first of all, I love the title and the imagery of it, and I'm wondering if you can explain how that came about.
Sure, yeah. So
Laura wrote the song, by the way.
Okay.
We sort of split songwriting on the
right, we
record.
tend to write separately and then come together and collab when we're producing it, the track. So for that one, I was left to my own devices and feeling really sad about somebody that we're close to who was going through something. So it was really my therapy, my self therapy, to try to process all that. And that's what the song is about. It's about someone we love dearly. So it was moody, and I really was hoping. And Andy, he arranged it pretty much exactly like it was written. So, and that doesn't always happen. And so I really like the feel of it. That's exactly what I was hearing in my head, what I was wanting to go for, this kind of a more rock tune.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
And
for me, because I'm the one who's producing and playing all the stringed instruments on the record, sometimes when she writes a song, I sort of reposition it and move it around. Dark Sun just came out, and it was just there. It was. I
mm,
didn't do anything other than produce a track, find the right parts. And in general, on this record, I was trying to break outside my cliches, the things that I sort of lean on and go to. With my songwriting, I tried some new things, and production wise. So like on this one, really tried to do some different things with her vocally.
mm-hmm.
It's a pretty lush kind of affair at times, and I like that impressionistic style. Leaning on going to like classical music influences. I love that
Mm-hmm.
impressionist type of composers like Debussy or Ravel or Prokofiev or Chopin or Bach. Those composers do have an impact, with me from a production point of view. So
Interesting. Okay, because it's not something people would normally guess necessarily, and Lord knows I'm not a classically trained musicologist that I could even pick that out.
I mean, the thing about those particular composers that they're very melody driven. And I like composers that are, and I like pop artists and country artists who are melody driven. Uh, Even though when I started playing guitar, I was like, it was all about lead guitar and the British guys, Jimmy
Hmm.
Page and Beck and Peter Green. So I started out just like I want to be a lead guitar player, but I really morphed into being a musician, a composer. Uh, you know that studying those guys and learning how to play that way has served me very well. It's sort of, I look at that as just like one of the arrows in my arsenal to pull out when a need be. But
Yeah, and building on that, 2 points. Number one, I don't think I consider the more I've learned and the more I've talked to musicians, the more I consider like rhythm guitar to be an art that's underappreciated as far as that goes. The
absolutely,
soloists
So
get
agree.
the spotlight and the attention, and I love a good guitar solo. Um, but it's like, can you create a rhythm and stuff that really hits people and moves people? And I can't remember who I was talking to recently, but we were talking about some of the artists that you were mentioning, English rockers influenced by American blues artists.
oh yeah,
And I don't remember who it was, but he said, yeah, he said, I bet if you asked though, like Keith Richards, he would say, I'm a rhythm guitar guy. I'm not, like a soloist. But that's what stands out in a lot of those classic Stones songs.
absolutely. I think you're really
Mhm.
spot on there. Uh, I love playing rhythm guitar, maybe as much, if not more, than lead guitar now. Probably more. Uh, when we did one of the first shows we did, which we just went out and played for 2.5 hours, just the two of us. And after that show, one of our friends who was there, he said, "Wow, I didn't realize what a big influence Pete Townsend had on you." I said, "Oh, thank you."
Mm.
Just like one of the greatest compliments ever, because I think he might be the greatest rhythm guitar player in rock and roll.
Hmm.
Uh, so
Interesting.
I mean, I love you know, and to me, when we're playing live, and a lot of times we're really kind of doing it in a stripped down version. A good song should be able to translate down to one acoustic guitar and one vocalist. Uh,
Hmm.
so yeah, like so on the record that we just did, there's a lot of acoustic guitar and a lot of rhythmic things going on there. So
Yeah, I've done some work with this artist. I don't know if you heard of her, named Jonathan Brooke, and her contention has been more as she's evolved and later in life been she's found her best songs are ones like, if I can duplicate this with just me and an acoustic guitar, then odds are that has the makings for something that's going to work well with a full band. So it's interesting that you say that as well.
yeah, I think there's a lot to that. Uh,
Hmm.
I think it's for us, we've made, this is now our fourth record, and as we um, put together playing live and picking all these various songs off the records and saying, which ones translate well to playing live, which ones are really good in the skeleton, the bones of the song, and it's been interesting to see. I've been a little surprised as to which ones do and don't translate.
Hmm.
And going back to the whole sort of lead guitar, rhythm guitar thing. I mean, early on, I was a big Led Zeppelin fan on their first couple of records, and as I have grown to listen to them more over the years, I really like, mostly at this point, um, their more acoustic-driven songs. I mean, Jimmy Page
Hmm.
really turned out to be like this really great rhythm guitar player. I
Yeah, well, yeah, like the opening to Ramble On, that just
Beautiful.
sells it.
Yeah, just great stuff.
Yeah. But and at the same time though, I do like when, because you don't overdo it. You're sparse, but you do put on some, it sounds like effects. And particularly with Dark Sun Rising, when you get to the chorus, there's this really cool vocal effect where it seems that the sound changes vocally from the verse to the chorus. And I'm wondering, was that a miking thing? Was it a technical detail or?
I think it's a combination of how we mic things and the fact that we have incredibly talented mix engineers.
Hmm.
We actually work with two different mix engineers, and I kind of split it between the two of them. Uh, One is a practical reason, and that is, when we get to the end of making the record or when we're mixing songs, because I've got two different guys mixing for me, the record gets mixed twice as fast because
Hmm.
they're both working on songs at the same time. And they each have their strengths, but you really couldn't tell listening to the record like which one is mixed by which person. They're both incredibly talented. When we mic the vocals, we're using, and this is a trick that my friend, one of our mix guys, Eddie, who's a long-time touring mix engineer, and he works for artists like Enrique Iglesias and Gwen Stefani. He's their in-ear monitor mix
Oh.
guy. So he's more important than the front of the house guy. He's
Hmm.
mixing for the artist. He's helped me tweak my studio out, and so he suggested, we've been doing this for the last couple of records. When recording the vocals, we record with two different microphones that are like right next to each other.
Hmm.
So what allows him to do as a mix engineer is, I like the sound of this mic on the verse, this mic on the chorus, or I like them blended. Like I might have this one forward on the verse, and then this one comes forward on the chorus. So it allows him more flexibility to create a different feel, like when you go in Dark Sun from the verse to the chorus.
Yeah.
So the specific way the voice sounds and the vocals sound on that track and on all the tracks really is as much to do with, as equally between how we're recording and using some really good microphones, but two different types, and them being able to really know how to manipulate it and make it sound good, clear everything out, clear all the instruments out of the way, and put
Hmm.
on some great effects. And he does some things that it's like magic, like something. I think there's one thing he did where he put some distortion on a vocal track. And like, it's like, you mean like a distortion pedal, like the guitar player's about to play a lead solo?
Hmm.
Sort of like that. And it's like, I would never have known that unless he told me. So it's sort of equally between that technical aspect of recording with two microphones and getting two different sounds that we can mix and match between, and the engineers just being world class when it comes to mixing. So
Yeah. And then there's what I would call the organic mixing effect, in that Laura will sound country at some times and then a little more rock at other times. And I'm wondering if that is intentional or is that just what comes out at the time?
B.
Okay.
It sort of depends on the circumstance. This song, for example, Boot Scootin', first
Hmm.
track, is so, that way. It's kind of rough and ready. And so it just needed to be a little more twangy and loosey goosey. So, then that affectation comes out. But I think that singers do that all the time. Opera singers do it. Elton John has done it, right? I mean, so many artists do that. Why do English singers sound, they lose their accent when they're singing
Yes.
times? So, because all those little nuances affect, your sound, the sound you're making, your head sound, your vocal sounding. So, I'm always playing in there.
Yeah. And then when your voice kind of goes to a more rock and roll place, it's fascinating to me because it's not the kind of vocal. It is a vocal you hear more with rock and that you don't hear with country. And I was racking my brain trying to figure out, all right, what the hell does this remind me of? And I had to have my wife's help on this a little bit, but finally came up with the Motel song, "Only the Lonely." Um,
Good comparison.
I can't think of what her name is, but there's just that tone, and it's like rough and with an ache, and but it's like a rock, and I'm like, oh, it's like if you took the Motel's vocal and then but put it in with a little bit more rhythm country-esque kind of thing, and I'm like, that's why it sounds to me completely different from a lot of stuff out there.
Interesting. Well, that's really nice to hear because I think it's a positive thing if you can sound as an artist a little bit familiar to people.
Mm-hmm.
So
But retain your your uniqueness.
Oh yeah, well, you hope, you hope. But initially, to connect with people, I think that's important. That's good.
Yes, there's so many artists out there who they're trying to sound like something else. They want to be successful, and maybe lose their identity a little bit along the way. I think you have to stay true to yourself, and do music for the right reasons, and not just because you want fame and fortune. I mean, I think there was a review we got on the last record that said that said they sort of are like Fleetwood Mac, like if Fleetwood Mac went to the hills and brought back a banjo, something like that,
Yeah.
So,
I mean, because it's I would say it's a different pitch, but Stevie Nicks is also someone that I thought of. Just I don't know, in the way you approach the song, in a way that you stretch out certain words here and there, and just the emotion it gives. Yeah, it did have kind of that Fleetwood Mac, at least her stuff, kind of vibe to it.
Yeah, there's certainly in there amongst bands that we have listened to a lot and been influenced by.
I mean, they're amazing songwriters, but just the vocal harmonies, they would spend so much time arranging vocals, and I sure appreciate that. I love it.
They're such an interesting band. I mean, I listened to them a lot early on because I was a big Peter Green fan.
Okay.
Who started the band. So I kind of got on them early, and then Laura was on them late.
Yeah.
They're kind of a different band, but it was still, Mick Fleetwood and John McVie. They were still anchoring that.
Right. Like, I'm betting you guys, I don't know if you've ever covered it, you could probably do a killer version of Silver Spring of theirs, which is a little deeper cut, but it's I could see you guys pulling that one off, where it's like, yeah, that's a hard one to do for most other bands,
Covering songs of other artists, we've experimented with that. We've done a few. It's not easy. You want to make it your own, but you don't want to lose the original feeling, but yet you don't want to copy. There's a lot of artists who just like redo a song and it sounds kind of just like the original artist.
Yeah.
You want to put your own spin on it, but yet you want it to still maintain integrity and stay true to what the original artist was saying.
Right. And then another song, which I think is really great at walking the line between you can't quite put a pin on it, because it's like, well, it's a little country, it's a little rock, it's a little this, that, is American Boy, which stylistically reminded me a little bit of Tom Petty, and not just because he wrote American Girl, but just I don't know, just the flow of the song, the way it's structured. But it's like, if you go through it a second time, it's like you realize there's a lot of stuff sonically happening here, and I'm wondering how you guys layered all that in. It doesn't sound overcrowded, and it's only like maybe a second listen that you realize how much is there, but I'm wondering how that all came together.
Boy, that song was a challenge, and I tend to start when I'm producing, always like trying to find the pieces to the puzzle, and I'll end up with a lot of different things that I like, and then so I start with sort of creating a lot of different tracks, and then you start getting into the editing process of like moving things out of the way, especially because initially she'll track vocals towards the beginning of the song to help me with the roadmap, because I'm still at the beginning. I'm working on the arrangement, what's right at the right time. How is the song supposed to flow? And you end up cutting and chopping and moving things around. And so when the vocals sort of come back on, when we start tracking later on to do final vocals, although a lot of times the demo vocals make it to the final version. So you're trying to piece everything together, but then also trying to move things out of the way so that the most important thing for us is the vocals and the lyrics and the overall vibe of the song. So I want the music to surround and complement Laura and support her. So that one also, it's a rock tune, but yet there's a lot of banjo in the song, which I loved about it. So I like mixing mandolin and banjos in with more rocky type feels. It just works. I'm always searching for just what's the right feel, and I could start out with an electric guitar, but a lot of times I'm like going to the resonator guitar or the Rickenbacker 12 string, or it's like I've got people come into the studio like, oh, we've got a lot of guitars. Like, well, I sort of do, but there is sort of one of each. I don't have 10 6-string electric guitars. Two. I have a baritone, Dan Electro baritone, and a Rickenbacker 12-string, and 3 different acoustic guitars, a resonator, a 6-string, a 12-string. It's just I want these choices. I have a banjo, I have a mandolin. So that song in particular, it was challenging, and
I thought it was so simple the way I wrote it. Love this. It's so straightforward and simplistic.
It was. Like I said, it was challenging to get all the puzzle pieces in there. Again, sort of touting how lucky we are to have these really talented mix engineers. They have complete autonomy. When I hand the song over to them to mix, they have editing autonomy. I'll get mixes back and I'm like, hey, where's that guitar part that I love that was over here in the second verse? Like, oh, well, it was getting in the way. It's like, okay, fine.
Wow.
So they will come back. I mean, their role is not only to mix, but to really sonically make it right in the way that everything fits together. I'm good in the studio. I'm really good at tracking and arranging and producing and playing, all that sort of stuff. But mixing is an art to itself. It's magic.
Also, I would say that, you have a very mature take on it. There's there's many stories and a long history of musicians that, fight and argue with their mixers and, want this control over stuff. And have you always had this perspective? Did you come to it gradually, or?
Good question.
I think I came to it gradually, but despite my gigantic ego, I do realize that I don't know everything, and that I know what my strengths are, and unfortunately, we have people around us that really help provide perspective that I will lose from time to time. You get so deep into a song when you're writing, tracking, producing it, that at some point I start to just doubt myself. Like, is this really right? Am I really on the right track? So it's nice to have people from the outside come in like, okay, I don't know any of these tracks. The mix guys come in like, I'm just going to put it in where I think it belongs, on the sound spectrum, the EQ of it all. I think that, and even when tracking using the drummer and the keyboard player, they're not coming into my studio. They have their own studios, and we just swap Pro Tool files. Like I will initially for a song, I'll just be using drum loops, and then at a certain point, I want the real drums. and I'll create stems. I'll send them down to our drummer, Randy Cook, down in LA, great drummer, and he'll play and send me back a couple passes, and I'll comp it together. But I really tell him, okay, the drum loops are there kind of like at a starting point for you, but really, truly, I want you to play what you hear.
Mm-hmm.
Got a little bit of a roadmap. And same with the keyboard player who, because I don't really, I can block out chords on keyboards and things like that, but I'm not a pianist.
Mm-hmm.
And the keyboard player who's out of Nashville, very quickly, when I started working with him, it was very apparent to me that I should just tell him to play what he hears.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked great. He'll send me back things and it's just like, things I would never be able to think of. But it's a wonderful collaboration. I love the freedom that they have to put everything that they have acquired as musicians into a track for us.
Yeah.
I just think it reveals things about the song that are there, but I just haven't discovered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and it just, again, I don't want my ego to get in the way. I want the greater good to come to bear.
Okay. And then how does your songwriting partnership usually work? Is it Laura usually handles vocals, you handle the melodies, or is it mixed?
We are both songwriters, and we do write separately, although there is a song on the album that we wrote together. She wrote lyrics and music, and I changed the music. And so basically we collaborate on that song. But we do write separately. So for her song, she's writing music and lyrics and vocal melodies. I'm doing the same for mine. They do both, they change from, like if you listen to the original voice memo demo that we would make for each other, from that to where it is on the album, it certainly changed. There's still a lot of, core elements that remain from the original demo.
Mm-hmm.
But, we're always changing things. Certainly for Laura, when we're in the studio and she's tracking songs that I've written, she's changing the melody lines to make it suit her singing style more. Because when I'm singing songs, I sound like Bob Dylan. It's like, more talky than singing, because I'm not a great singer. So she'll change things. And I think more so when we're producing her songs, I'm dialing into the things I think she's doing really well and trying to just make them fit. And there's also, there's just a certain amount of discovery when you're tracking songs that just, lead you to find better ways to do it at times.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly for Laura, when she's tracking on the songs I'm writing, we're always, she'll change a lyric here or there. It's like, oh, this line's not singing well. Can we think of a different way to do it? How about try this, or how about this word? So there's the collaboration, even though we're starting really writing on our own in the studio, we're collaborating together on every song.
Okay. And then, there's always some sort of surprise when I'm researching whoever I'm going to talk to. And this time, one thing, it's, I guess, not a huge surprise, but just I didn't expect. You guys seem to be real foodies as far as it goes. In that, you have that Cookin' and Country YouTube series. And then also you go through your social media. It's like, you guys really, are into what you're making, or if you're out somewhere, it's like, oh, this is really interesting and it pairs well with this. And maybe you've been asked this time and again before, I don't know, but do you approach creating a dish the way you approach creating a song?
Wow.
That's a great question. I think the answer to a certain extent is yes. I mean, for me, when I'm cooking, a lot of times I read through a lot of cookbooks. I think they're really fun to read, relaxing. And So if I make a recipe, if I make it more than a few times, I start to just embellish it. And to a certain extent, there's just a certain amount of improvisation. It's like, oh, this might be good with mushrooms instead of corn. It's like, maybe I should try that. So that's the fun thing about cooking. There's a lot of similarities in that there's a certain amount of math involved.
Hmm.
Oh, 1 cup, half cup, but then if you've cooked enough, it's 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Okay, I can eyeball that.
Yeah.
So I think Laura's more a baker, and when you're baking, you got to be a lot more precise. Cooking, you can be more improvisational. So I think maybe the fact that I sort of lean into playing lead guitar in the beginning and listen to a lot of jazz earlier in my life, the great improvisers, sort of lent itself to helping with my cooking skills. Also, because there's a certain amount of improvisation there. And I think also that there's something about the process of cooking and playing music that, and I sort of wrote about it a little bit, sort of as the behind the scenes sort of view and inspiration for Scootin. Going into a rehearsal or in the studio, to me, is the same as if I'm going in to cook dinner. I'm leaving everything else outside at the door. I'm not thinking about paying the bills or what's happening next week or anything. Like, you're just there in the zone and just free to be in the moment with your passion and to enjoy things. And I find the similarities there between playing music and cooking. In Boot Scootin', I use dancing as the vehicle to express this sort of deeper view of people trying to find something that will allow them the freedom to relax and enjoy and not worry about things, because it's people worry about things a lot, including me. So I really need that time to not feel stressed.
Yeah.
So,
and it's interesting. Maybe there's something to this. It was several years back. I saw Alison Krauss in Union Station performing out here, and during a break between songs, she mentioned that when she's going to bed at night and stuff, she'll often read cookbooks as just kind of this way to quiet her mind and just cool out and just calm and nice and easy and so I found that funny that it's like, oh, okay, you also read cookbooks just for fun, not always to make a recipe.
I mean, cookbooks are they're not really, you think, oh, I need recipes, I want to cook Italian, so I'm going to buy an Italian cookbook. But you get a sense of the person behind it all and how inspired they are. And there's so much improvisation in their cooking and so much that they take from so many other people. It's kind of like us as musicians. There's so many musicians that we've listened to that we take a little bit from each of them and create our own point of view. I think the same with chefs. They're students of their craft. And I think that cookbooks are interesting, that they reveal the personalities of the chefs, and I think that creating a really good meal is like creating a really good song. There's all these different pieces to the puzzle, and they have to come in at certain times. Like when you're cooking, like you don't necessarily, like if you're doing a stir fry, it's not put all the vegetables in the wok. No, like some vegetables take shorter time or longer time to cook than others. So it's the same with creating a song and working in the studio, that things come in and out and things appear and they get bigger, they get smaller. It's like it's there's some similarities there that I find interesting. Definitely.
Yeah, and it's and also it is funny because it is this yin and yang of, on the one hand, there is math, there is measurements and all this kind of thing. On the other hand, my wife and lots of other people we know who like to cook, like, okay, gotta have a gas stove, can't have electric. And yet, just by having a gas stove, it's not precise. It's just you're kind of eyeballing the flame as far as it goes. So there's
Yeah.
always that aspect to it too.
Yeah. They've got these new induction stoves, which are like super precise. Cook it at 107.4 degrees or whatever. It's like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, for Michelin 3-star chefs cook, hey, I understand why they would use it. We would, us common folk would not use that ever. We're used to the gas stove, and again, it's kind of the eyeball thing. And sometimes you're not paying attention. You're trying to toast some pine nuts or walnuts, and all of a sudden, they're burned because
Yeah.
they're up too high or whatever.
Mhm.
So there, yeah, but there's obviously you have discovered that we are people who like to eat and we like to cook. And the Cooking and Country show was, our manager Erin, who's based out of Nashville. She started Olivia Management. She when we first started working with her, she said, I have I tell a lot of my artists, because a lot of our artists, including us, we're sort of starting out, trying to create a path for ourselves. And she said, I tell my artists to try to do some guerrilla marketing.
Mhm.
What's that? I said, well, it's a way of doing some marketing, advertising, promoting yourself without spending a lot of money.
Yeah.
So we did something kind of fun on the first record, and Cooking and Country was sort of around when we were doing the second record. And we had never, we played music a long time. We worked in studios and done the traditional things that musicians have, but we've never shot video like that. We made so many mistakes, but yet it still was fun. It was a high wire act because it wasn't like you're seeing, the Food Network, and if you make a mistake on a dish, okay, there's 4 of them in the back room.
Right.
No, it was, I'm cooking it, and if it doesn't turn out well, there goes that episode,
Yeah. And then I actually had a conversation just the other day with that talked about similarities between cooking and music. If these friends of ours brought up Alton Brown on the Food Network, he has this thing where I guess he rails against single use kitchen items. Because you could have a kitchen stocked with all these things that, I only use this once a year for this one small task, and he's really against that. And he really, and then one of the bands I work with is this band out of Ohio called Red Wanting Blue, and they have some different instruments and stuff that they utilize and stuff, but their whole thing is, all right, we don't want to have something we just use for one song, so it's the drummer has a floor tom on his left side that he created for this one tune that he wanted to do, but now it's like, okay, how can I utilize that for a bunch of other songs so that when we're going on the road, it's not just there for one song, we're utilizing it for as many purposes as possible.
It was interesting that at some point during the second record, there was a song. It's like, I think I'm hearing like banjo and mandolin, and I had really never played those instruments before. But I thought, well, I know how to play guitar. I should be able to play those, and I got them, and I managed to fake it pretty well. But I ended up using them, and they've become staples in the studio. Like, I use them all the time, and to a certain extent, it's like they're always in the thought process when I'm tracking a song. Like, where are the pieces of the puzzle that I'm going to use? And I like doing things that are a little unexpected, like in My American Boy. It's a real rockin' tune, and it kind of almost has a little like the solo section is a little kind of the chord changes are a little sort of prog rocky, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a banjo playing the solo, you know,
Yeah.
and it's like you just unless who's the great banjo player?
Bela Fleck.
Yes, I mean he is so out of the box playing
Yeah.
banjo. So he was sort of my. I mean, I wouldn't say he was my inspiration, but seeing him and knowing who he is and absorbing what he does, I think subconsciously may have led me to just like, oh, well, I can put a banjo right here.
Mm-hmm.
So, but going back to it, it's like, okay, well, I've got the banjo and the mandolin. I want to use them all the time. It's just another color for me, you know, to use in the palette.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I get that. Yeah. Again,
And I
cooking.
think the other connection between music and cooking to me is that they're both high levels of enjoyment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, and as you said, there's a Zen state to them where it's just like, all right, everything else just gets pushed to the side if you're doing it right anyway.
That's a great way of
Um,
putting
yeah. This is just, minor geeky kind of question, but I was just curious. With the name Three Pairs of Boots, what drove you to use the number three rather than spelling out the word three?
Oh, you're good. These are
it.
good.
I think it was just it was nice to have a symbol in there instead of a word.
Okay.
And initially, when we started this project, there was a good friend of ours who was helping us write songs in the very beginning of this all. And so, oh, well, if he sticks with us, I kind of want the name to have a reference to that there are three of us.
Mm,
I have no idea how I came up with the name Three Pairs of Boots, but the inspiration was to somehow, let people know there's three people doing this.
yeah.
So,
And even in the new video, you have three people on stage at the time, and so.
and in fact, the bass player, our good friend Happy Sanchez, he was the guy who was in with us at the very beginning, helping us write a few songs as we were discovering, what Three Pairs of Boots was all about. And then he left. He went on to do other things. I played in a couple of bands with him. He's done some Latin music projects.
Oh.
And so he's and then when we decided to start playing live, he's now back back with us playing bass. So it's nice that he's helping us. He's been a real inspiration to us throughout the years.
Cool. Very cool. All right. Well, I always tend to default to this just in case, but is there anything we haven't discussed that you want to talk about, or, as you do other interviews, that maybe you don't get asked about, but that you would like to talk about?
Well, I think that your initial take on us was really spot on. We're a bit of an outlier, and so it's made our journey from a business point of view to be a little more difficult because we can't be pigeonholed. And while that is a challenge, at the same time, I think it's created a unique identity for us. I mean, our publicist, when we pitched her, she's worked with us for the previous two records. And when we went to her and said, okay, we got another record, she said, well, let me listen to it. And after the weekend, she came back and said, I can always tell it's you. Like you just have that identifiable sound. So a singer like Stevie Nicks, she's not the greatest singer in the world.
I beg your pardon.
She has an identifiable. There's a lot of great singers out there. She has an identifiable style, and she's unique.
You didn't mean that, Stevie. You didn't mean that. You didn't mean that. You're great. I'm just in case you used that.
Yes. Well, it was not a criticism of her. It was just more the point that she has she has an identity. You know, her as a person comes through the way she sings,
She's very soulful.
and so often, you know, you can just hear a lot of music that just it's really good, well put together, but yet, do I know who they are?
Yeah.
You know, that could it could be a lot of people. Uh,
Hmm.
so uh, I'm glad that, you know, it wasn't we set out to like, oh, let's do this so we can be, you know, different than everybody else. No, it's just we're just putting into it all the influences that we have grown up with and loved, um, into what we're doing. And you know, so much of when you're listening to music, you know, yes, you're falling in love with a lot of artists and albums and songs. At the same time, it's helping you make a lot of choices because there's a lot of things out there that you don't particularly care for. Not that they're bad necessarily, but they're just not your cup of tea. So, you know, it's enabled us to really make really good decisions about what we like, um, in that. And I'm perfectly happy with the fact that we are maybe a little different than a lot of others, other artists, because we have a style that, you know, without really intending to do it this way, it's just sort of it's just what came out. You know, it's what the recipe seems to call for.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, it kind of reminds me of the story of the evolution of the Zach Brown band, and how they started out as a country artist, and then and they hit it big, and then they want to do just explore other influences, other it's like, well, this is calling to me this way, this is calling me that way. And actually, if you see them in concert, they do cover songs as well as their originals, and it's all across the board. They'll cover Etta James, they'll cover Metallica, Dave Matthews.
That's
Uh,
cool.
yeah. And initially, their original record label tried to keep them in the box. No, you're a country artist, you need a country thing. And that's when they, told their original label to shove it. And there's an EP that they released called the Grohl Sessions, which is really cool. And it comes with this DVD that showed the making of it. And it was, they didn't have a label and he happened to run into Dave Grohl and said, "Hey, we want to do an EP of all these songs our label wouldn't let us do. Would you produce it?" And he's like, "Oh, sure,"
Wow.
And it's fabulous. And they have that side of them. They're still a very, they still have a fiddle player on stage all the time.
Hmm.
It's still part of their sound, but it's like, well, why do we have to pigeonhole? And if we're feeling a little more rock on this one, why shouldn't we be able to play that? And they've gotten even bigger, I would argue, because of that. So, it seems like you're in good company, and it's almost natural for a professional musician to, have outside influences and not a straight path.
I agree. Genres shouldn't have borders, right?
Yes.
Just be able to
I mean, we're lucky
showcase it all.
that because we were born and raised in the Bay Area out here in California, and the music scene here for a long time was not compartmentalized.
Right.
You know, you'd go to shows and there'd be a big band and a rock band and a Latin band, all on the same show, and it was a great way to be exposed to a lot of different music. And I think, for us personally, we don't really, when we're creating music for Three Pairs of Boots, we don't really have boundaries for ourselves. The
Hmm.
songs just kind of lead us to where they need to go. So I don't think there's anything that we haven't really covered in general that I'm thinking about, but I'm really glad that you started out with that, uh, because I think that's something that we've come to recognize, that we're not, neatly fitting into a box, so to speak. And I
So
think
I was
that's,
just going to lean into that
Yeah.
myself.
yeah,
Yeah, definitely. As you said, it's better to, have someone who listens and goes, "Oh, I immediately know it's you."
yes. And I think there's a certain amount of longevity. I mean, I'm always, when I'm songwriting, it's like I'm always trying to write a song that will be remembered in 50 years. So there was a song in the second record that I was out in the backyard and Laura was up in the kitchen and she was playing, she's got the, streaming on, and the song came on. I was like, oh my God, that song is incredible. Like that. I wonder like who wrote that? How old is this song? I want to write a song like that. So I did try to write a song. It's a ballad on the second record. And when I came up and discovered that song, it was like, oh my God, that song was written by Leonard Cohen, and it was like a throwaway on one of his records. And it turned out to be this incredibly, well covered and well received song. It was not a single. It was just another track, an album track. It was the song Hallelujah.
Yeah, actually, they made a whole documentary just about that song and how, initially it did nothing and the label didn't know what to do with it and everything. And it wasn't until it started getting reinterpreted and covered by all these people that it was like, wow, how did we miss this amazing tune?
Right. So it's kind of like with Pet Sounds. When it came out, it didn't like come out with like a huge bang right to the number one. No, it took a while for people to discover it and to realize how great it was.
Yeah.
So I think to a certain extent, we're not looking for, the overnight success. I personally want longevity. I would love to know that, after I'm gone, people are still listening to a song I wrote,
Mm-hmm.
So that's, always looking to write. It's very pure, I think, just to write the great song.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a lofty goal, and there are really only a handful of people who can truly do that consistently. But
your goals are a lot higher than my goals.
Well, I'm trying to, lift you up, and you bring me down to reality. Like, you get your head out of the clouds.
A good balance. A good balance.